Welcome to the Topic of the Month with Kim Wardlow, an AINC original podcast. It's not easy being blind or going through vision loss, but we'll help you navigate these waters. Press on. Push forward. You've got this.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Topic of the Month, brought to you by the Audio Information Network of Colorado. We're covering a different topic each month. This is January, and we are talking about independent living and various aspects of that. So we've covered being in college, starting your career, organizing your personal environment. And today we are going to be talking about cooking. It's the new year. It may be a New Year's resolution for you. It may just be something you enjoy doing, but we'll get some tips about cooking with vision loss, and we'll be talking to Chris Kaufman today. And I just want to remind you, if you would be so kind as to leave us a comment or leave a review for us on whatever platform you're listening to us on, that would be most helpful to us. So we will be right back and talking to Chris.
This is Topic of the Month with Kim Wardlow. If you enjoy what you hear, please visit AIN Colorado for more shows, news, and articles read by our amazing staff and volunteers. If you have a question for Kim or would like to recommend a guest for future shows, please visit aincolorado.org/podcast-guest. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
Chris, thanks for joining us today for our topic of the month.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Oh, sure. And I always ask everyone, since these are monthly things, if there is something about January or starting a new year, something you look forward to in January or that you like about January.
I'm not generally a resolution person, but I am a gym goer. And unfortunately, I don't have something I like, I have something I dislike, and that's that the gym is always extra crowded, and it's always really hard to get my workouts done in the planned time because someone is almost always where I need to be. But it's also exciting because you get to see how many people are really taking, a good first step. Usually by February, it dies down a little bit, but sometimes you get the people who stick it out, and then now you have a new gym friend, because they stuck to their resolutions. So maybe you could say I'm looking forward to making new gym friends while I wait to use the equipment I need to use.
There you go. Looking on the positive side. Well, I know you joined us last summer for our hike.
I did.
And that was great. I think that was the first time I had met you in person. So I know you're active in that way and came hiking with us. And you were so kind also. Last summer, we had just lost our volunteer director, and she was really into the beach and had been planning to go to Hawaii and things. And you brought the lace for all of us. And so that was so nice and thoughtful of you to do that, where we were doing the hike in her honor.
Yeah, I didn't know her, but I was getting very teary-eyed when I listened to Penn mention her on her podcast. And I just was like, I feel so moved to do something. And it was, thank goodness for quick 2-day shipping. I was able to quickly order those and get those brought up because I just thought it would be a really nice thing. And it was such a great turnout, and to see everybody wearing them and bring, a little bit of color to it. It was just, I was happy to do it. It was so lovely to hear about her through everybody's memories. So I'm glad that it was well received.
It was so thoughtful of you. And I know we'll be mentioning a hike as we progress through the year because we do that every summer. So that will be coming up later on this year. Chris, just as an introduction, I don't know if you would like to tell folks a little bit about yourself. I know, am I correct that you haven't been in Colorado terribly long?
So yesterday was 10 years for me.
Oh, longer than I thought.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very long. It feels like half of that. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. Very different. And I used to ski as a kid, and I didn't start losing my vision until my early 20s. So as a kid, I always knew I wanted to live in Colorado. And I came out here in the summer of 2012 when I did know I did have some vision loss by then. And I wanted to kind of see and gauge what transportation was like and what it would be like to live here compared to the only place I was used to. And within 6 months, I made the plunge and moved in the middle of winter. I don't know what I was thinking, but I guess, you just got to commit. So yeah, I came out in January of 2013, and I've loved it. I've never once thought about moving back home. It's wonderful here.
Well, as a native Coloradan, I'm glad you enjoy it. So welcome to our state. I'm glad you're enjoying living here. I've lived here all my life. So for the most part, apart from college and some things like that, but yeah, it's a pretty great place to be. Were you cooking when you were a kid? Is that something you've just always enjoyed, or was that something that you learned later on?
So I really my mom would let me bake with her when I was young, but my mom and my dad, neither of them, politely, let's say, neither of them were cooks. Let's just say that. So I started experimenting I was actually sick, and I was watching the Food Network to pass the time while I was sick. And I couldn't tell you the show or the recipe, but I remember thinking, this sounds and looks like a complicated dish, but the way that they're showing me how to do it, I'm going to try to make this weekend. And that's it. That's what started it. I just started watching TV. I would bring things into the office where I worked at the time, baked goods or even food. And I wish I could say it was my own idea, but it was my boss who said to me, I don't understand why you don't go to culinary school. I was like, oh my gosh, you're brilliant. I'm going to do that. So then I did that. And I went to culinary school studying pastry specifically. So definitely always have a sweet tooth and enjoy that. But I also do just really enjoy cooking. And regardless, the program that I studied in, whether you prefer to focus on pastry or cooking, you have to take at least the 101 version of the opposite. So even though everything was pastry focused, I still had to take cooking 101. And you got to learn, all the different parts of all of the animals, how to section them, different basic things, sauces, reductions, and all these different things. And it stuck. I still have all of my textbooks. I say that Thanksgiving is my Olympics. I love it. I make everything from scratch. I do it all by myself every year. And so I'm not a resolution person, as I said, but this year I have committed to doing a Thanksgiving. I'm probably going to do it over Memorial Day weekend just to allow for it, but I'm going to do it in the summer because once a year is just it's not enough. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I think when you invite, we'll appreciate that.
I hope so, because it's going to be a lot of food. I'll call you.
Well, I'm impressed that your focus was a pastry chef, because I think pastries, I love pastries, but it seems so complicated to cook them, to bake them sometimes. And really good pastries are they're so impressive and light and delicious. So
it is very time consuming, but it's worth everything. It's worth it.
So when you were learning to cook, did you have any vision loss at that time?
So yes.
When you were in school,
yes.
I should say, not learning to cook, but when you went to culinary school.
I did, actually. That's actually when it started. And it started so gradually, and the brain, so I have Stargardt's disease, and that's a loss of central vision. And your brain is brilliant at filling in the holes. So as I was losing my vision, I didn't understand that that's what was happening. When I was studying in school, because even though it's culinary school, you still have to take tests and you still have to read, and there's all of that that's happening. And I noticed I didn't feel like I had enough light, and I had a really hard time seeing my books. And I didn't put anything together until I had an eye doctor that asked me to do a visual field test. And when I saw the results of that, was the only time I realized I couldn't actually see in the middle, the headaches that I was having were so intense. And once I understood that I had to rely on peripheral vision to read, my headaches subsided significantly. And it did make things a little bit harder. But while I was in class, I actually remember telling one of my instructors that it was a cake decorating class. And that was when we didn't know what it was. It wouldn't be for almost 7 more years that I would have a diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
But I knew that my dream, at least as, to be a pastry chef or to own my own shop or whatever, maybe that was going to look different for me. So, I did confide in one of my chefs that, your instructors, they're chefs. And I just let her know, I'm losing my vision. I don't know what's happening, but I think I'm going to take a break from school. And then I did. But while I was in school, again, being from Las Vegas, a new hotel was opening, as they do every day. And one of my chefs was very good friends with the head pastry chef at this resort. And he and I vowed to never work in a hotel being from Vegas. But he so strongly recommended me, said that I was one of his best students. And I went there and I worked there for 4 years, right up until the time I moved to Colorado. And it was a very good experience. I met some amazing people. And, if you are open and comfortable communicating to people that you don't see the way that they do, in my experience, they're very helpful. And I think people genuinely just want to help you. And working in a casino, the amount of coworkers you have is in the thousands. And I mean,
right.
You're interacting with dozens, if not hundreds of people a day. And it was I'm ultimately glad I did it. And I wouldn't have ever done that if it wasn't for culinary school and kind of just making the connections I made there. So, but yeah, I ultimately, I left Vegas and I came to Colorado and I tried getting into food and beverage out here. And I actually really struggled. I thought, being from Vegas, anybody would want to snatch me up, but that wasn't my experience. And I ended up falling into a marketing position, and that's what I do now. And so I bake and cook for myself and my family. And I still love it. And I've probably lost, more than half of my vision since all of that started. So I think everything just kind of fell into place and worked out the way it was supposed to. And with gadgets and everything that's available to help you in the kitchen, I mean, I don't, now that's not to say I haven't picked up the wrong spice and maybe done the wrong thing once or twice, but still, I still think that I'm very confident in the kitchen.
Well, and I'm sure that many of our listeners have a similar experience. I know not everyone just loses a set amount of vision and it just stays that way. I think many conditions, it's very common that vision loss may continue to progress. And in terms of you being in the kitchen and how you did things, how did you adjust? And do you have any advice on people who are, especially people who really love to cook and now as they're losing some vision, they're needing to make adjustments so they can continue doing that?
So the advice I have is largely twofold, in that, one, you are obviously responsible for the things you can control. And then two, you have to try to get your family to be on board. And that's not always possible. At least, let's just say it's not always consistent. So what I mean by that is, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is organize your kitchen in a way, especially if you're the person who's the primary cook, organize the kitchen in a way that makes sense to you. And then do everything you can to keep it that way. Because as soon as you move something, that's when you're putting salt in your coffee. So, my kitchen is perfect when I put the groceries away and when I organize everything. But if my husband cooks, the spices get mixed up And, maybe now the blackened seasoning is mixed with the paprika and they're both red. This is true story. They're both red and they, one is spicy and one is not. And that can very quickly affect a dish. So getting others who also share your space to help you maintain organization very, very consistently really is key. I think that will help a lot. The other thing I have that you can try for things, if you're a person who still has what I would refer to as quite a bit of functional vision still, you can still see colors quite well, and you can still make out some text, maybe bump dots or colored stickers on certain spices. So for example, as a baker, I probably have 7 or 8 different flavored extracts that I can think of off the top of my head right now in my spice cabinet. All of the bottles except for 2 look identical. So I put colored stickers that I just got from the dollar store. They're just like they're like maybe the size of a penny, and they're very bright. One is bright blue, neon pink, neon orange, very vibrant. I can see them very clearly, and I have marked the ones with just whatever I felt made sense to me. So I know this one is coconut and this one is maple. And those, again, are very different things. And you can really mess up what you're doing if you accidentally mix those up, and then there's other devices like the Pen Friend, which it's quite expensive. But it's a very cool tool where it's shaped like a pen. It's not an actual pen, but you record your voice into the top of it, and that recording is tied to a specific sticker. And then you can place that sticker on an item. So an example of that is my pantry. I have all of the different types of flour that I use in bins, and I make sure that they're in the exact order that I expect them to be. But also I have them labeled in just really big font. But this would be a good example of when you could use a Pen Friend and you could say, this is bread flour. And then when you record that and stick that sticker on the bread flour, you use the Pen Friend as a scanner, basically, and it reads it back to you. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very cool tool. So I think organization is the best way to start. If you're not a person that does that, definitely, start brainstorming and getting ideas of how to do that. And the next step is any recipe you ever make, you should read through it from start to finish before you ever even step foot in the kitchen. So in culinary school, they teach you mise en place, which is French, which basically means everything in place. So if you watch a cooking show, all of the ingredients are in little bowls before they start, and they dump them in as they call for them.
Right.
That's mise en place. If you know what you need before you need it, it'll stop you from realizing you're out of an ingredient in the middle of a recipe, or you don't have enough. It'll stop you from burning something because you've stepped away to walk to the fridge and you can't find the thing you think you have, so on and so forth. If you can read through, prioritize, plan, it also just helps things go a little smoother, especially if you're not as confident in the kitchen.
Yeah, that would give you time if you do it all ahead of time before you actually start mixing or cooking, putting things on a stove or in an oven. If you get all of that in order, you can even have everything measured out and in the order that you need it. I could see where that would really, that would be helpful for anyone, but especially if you have some vision loss, just to feel confident of where each ingredient is and that you have it. It would give you time to be able to measure everything out without feeling in any kind of rush. Well, and I think you mentioned how useful the Pen Friend could be and that it is a bit expensive, but I would just say it's come up in other shows too for other purposes, labeling clothes or other things. So it does seem, depending on a person's budget and things, but it might be a good investment just because it can be used in multiple ways and multiple areas, rooms in your house or areas of your life.
Yes, that's an excellent.
Are there other gadgets that you found really helpful or that are your favorites?
Yes.
that maybe are adaptive?
I have used a talking food scale since 2009. And it has changed. Again, being in culinary school, you weigh everything, and I understand that that's not for everybody. But if you do come across an ingredient that gives you metric measurements instead of cups or something, you could quickly do a conversion. And if you're trying to measure, 1 6/7 of a cup or 16 teaspoons, which happens to be a cup, but if you're measuring something that is kind of awkward to actually measure by the cupful, if you have a scale, it makes your recipe just come out much more exact, and in my opinion, that much better. It's also great if part of your cooking is maybe portion control or tracking your meals and understanding how much you're eating. This is a great way to weigh out your food once it's been cooked, especially if you're meal prepping, things like that. So a talking scale, I love it. There is another scale I use. It's not talking, and I have it on my list to email them and ask them if they would consider making it talking. But it is a high contrast scale, and it is the most accurate scale I have ever used. And I wish I had it nearby because I don't know the name of it, but it's very inexpensive in my opinion. It's less than $20, and it does milliliters and grams, fluid ounces and ounces. And if you're a cooking person, that's amazing. It is just so accurate. I love that. Another gadget that's actually new to me that was suggested by, an O&M person through DVR is a high contrast cutting board. I have really struggled cutting things like boiled eggs or white onions on a white cutting board. And it just didn't occur to me to try a different color cutting board. So that's brilliant. Different, whether it's high contrast and it's two-sided, or if you just have multiple cutting boards. I'm a person, I've probably got 4 or 5 cutting boards in my kitchen, and I use them all. So that's great. A talking food thermometer is also new to me. I don't know why I never considered it if there was a talking scale, but the O&M guy also let me know about that, and I love it. It's great. It just really helps if you have to really know. So I like to smoke meat. I have a Traeger, and I am the smoker. It's how I cook my turkey every year. So it's important to me that I know and be able to read the, internal temperatures. So it's a digital thermometer, and it will read the temperature to you. And that's also very, very helpful.
Do you do any grilling?
I will do grilling on my Traeger. So I'll just do it at the same time. I'll just crank it up really high. But most of what I do is probably, I would say I use the smoker more. I will use the grill for burgers and things like that, but.
Right. I didn't know if there was any differences or any tips from being in your kitchen to being like out using your smoker or your grill.
That one's tough. I guess I probably do things that I don't even realize that I'm doing out there, but I've never consciously thought about it. I will say, like, the whole mise en place, that's one thing I find myself constantly going inside and outside because I just don't have the thing that I need. I've gone outside and I've forgotten my thermometer, or I've gone outside and I've checked the thermometer, but I forgot to bring a plate to put the food on. So thinking ahead would be very good in those situations, especially on a grill. If you've got really high heat, you can very quickly overcook something if you don't have that plate nearby. So, I think just making sure that your outdoor area, if you have something set up or if you have a table nearby, that you can kind of set things up. I should take my own advice on that because I've never done that. It's honestly like I find that I prop the storm door to my back door open because I'm constantly having to go inside and outside. So yeah, I think I need to take my own advice and do mise en place for my outdoor cooking.
Well, I'm just also wondering about, this would probably be more indoor cooking, but if you're using common appliances, a stand mixer, a food processor, how you make adjustments if you're not able to see how well something is mixed or, at what stage it is in the food processor. Just just little adjustments for folks that if they've lost enough vision that they're not really able to gauge those things by sight?
So my default answer would be use your fingers when you can and safely when in a food processor, carefully and not touching the blade. But that's going to be one of the better ways, is if you're trying to get something ground down to like something very fine, you may just have to get your hands a little bit dirty. If you do have someone in the home that can maybe come and help and take a peek, that would be very good. That's might be something more specific to a mixer, because you absolutely can overmix things like muffins and cookies and things like that. So you don't want to just assume, well, I'm going to run this an extra 2 minutes because I want to make sure it's really mixed up. You're not going to end up with the best possible result that way. So it's not something that I've used, but it's something I'm very aware of, and I'm sure some of the listeners are as well, which is the app that's called Be My Eyes. And you could use that and have somebody look at something for you as well and kind of say, okay, no, I can still see some dry stuff. It's not quite mixed, and maybe if you explain, well, I'm trying to make cookies and I need to know if it's mixed. And maybe they can say, oh, it's most of the way there. Run it for just a couple more seconds or mix it by hand, maybe. So I think if you have someone in your home, or if you have the app Be My Eyes and you can have someone that can actually take a look, that could be helpful. But in certain instances, if it's applicable and you can use your hands, that's another great way. Making bread, for instance, making bread by hand, it's a bit of a task, but it's blind bread bakers specifically are actually not that uncommon, because it's all by touch. It's very tactile. Right. So maybe you're not going to make something very delicate like a meringue where you can very quickly over whip it, or maybe not something like a whipped cream where if you whip it too long, it becomes butter. But, if you have some of these things available to you, there's no reason that you shouldn't at least try. And once you start, especially if you're using equipment that you're already familiar with. So a mixer, for example, depending on the type, if you have one that's a KitchenAid brand that has a slider for the speed, you could have somebody help you place a bump dot to know that this is middle of the road, because audibly, it's not always obvious what your speed is. Right. So maybe you would put
because the sound would change based on what you're mixing.
Oh, of course. So maybe you could put something like that on there too to help with those things.
And then do you use similar types of techniques, touch or having assistance with looking at something to test for doneness?
I will do that very specifically with chicken, because there's times that I don't believe my thermometers. So I've calibrated them. They tell me that it's done, but I'm looking at it, or I've taken a bite of it and I don't believe it to be true. And in those instances, I will always ask my husband, does this look cooked? Does it look good? If he's not here, he is a truck driver, so he's often not home. I will, as a person who has absolutely had food poisoning, unfortunately, from undercooked chicken before, I would rather eat that dry chicken than risk it. So I'm going to put it back in the pan for myself if I'm not really sure. There's other cuts of meat that you can kind of get away with that, even things like eggs and fish, where if it's a little bit under, it's still absolutely safe to consume. So on anything that doesn't fall into that category, I'm going to put it back in the pan, and I'm going to go ahead and throw it in for just a few more seconds to make sure. But sometimes with doneness, like let's say, for instance, this happened to me with brownies recently. I was absolutely sure that they were cooked all the way through, and they were not. But a gooey brownie is still fudgy and delicious. So even though it wasn't quite what I was going for,
it was still good.
It was very good. So I would say be very mindful of what it is you're cooking when you're checking for doneness, and absolutely get a second opinion. Or if it's meat, just put it back in the pan for a few more seconds and, on medium heat, or back in the oven for just a couple minutes. Again, it may not be the best product, but if it keeps you from getting sick, it's very good. Unless you know you can trust your thermometer. I'm telling you, I know for a fact I cannot trust my thermometers.
Do you have any tips on safety in the kitchen? And even just generally, like a cake, they'll say you can put a toothpick in, or you can just, touch it and see if it springs back. And of course, you have to do that quickly and carefully so you don't burn yourself.
So I think this is actually where, mise en place really carries over to the final result as well. And a lot of that just really translates into taking your time. If you are rushing, you are more likely to get hurt, whether that's because you're using a knife and you're cutting quickly, or you feel like you quickly need to look at something, or, if you need to gauge something and you are maybe, like for me, I'm going to be putting my face very close to something. I have a gas stove, and if I do and I have long hair, and as a child, this is a lesson you learn one time. I got a little too close as a kid, and it singed my hair a little bit, and I could see back then. So that lesson has stuck with me, and I always reduce the heat before I stick my face very close to try to see something, because for me, that is usually what I do first, which is maybe not advisable. So safely get close if you can, but really not rushing through something and thinking, like for me, my depth perception is affected. So there are times where I think I've placed a pot all the way on the stove and I've been wrong. Take your time, use two hands, and be certain of it, and then step away and move on. Another thing for safety is anytime you're using a knife, try to cut against your knuckles and not your fingertips. There's guides and there's protectors that you can put on your fingers. When you're placing something, if you're cooking something, let's say a steak, and you really need to preheat that pan and you want a really good sear, you need a screaming hot pan. If you're going to lay that steak in, you lay it in the pan away from you. When you're adding things to boiling water, same thing, slowly away from you. There's a lot that can be done. And these are things that everybody should be doing. As you noted, this is not necessarily specific to vision impairment, but it's just key, because if you're a person who has lost your sight or is losing your sight, I think a lot of us, we get comfortable in a place with our sight loss because it's maybe been stable and just until it isn't. And then if you've lost more of it, well, you've been so complacent for so long that you don't realize you need to change your habits until maybe you get hurt. So you really want to be intentional about what you're doing, and take your time and just not rush, and ask for help. If someone is available to help you, ask for help. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. And I hate to say that, there's no harm in that, because it literally is maybe avoiding harm to yourself. I've definitely got burns all over my forearms from culinary school, from reaching in to grab something out and not being aware of where the sides of the oven were. So, maybe longer oven mitts to protect yourself and things like that.
Yeah. And I've even seen a tip, if you're cutting something and then you need to set the knife down, maybe to get another ingredient to cut or something, to put the sharp edge of the knife under the cutting board, so that if you're feeling to find the knife, your hand isn't accidentally going to hit the blade, but that you'll find the handle and then you can take it out. I don't know if that's something you do, but that's something that I've heard as a safety tip in the kitchen.
I would maybe suggest putting that on the back side of the cutting board, so the furthest point away from you, so that it can't fall off of the countertop.
Right.
And then maybe also under, but then the blade would be facing you. So the alternative is, face the blade away from you behind the cutting board. But again, always slowly reach for that knife, slowly feel for the handle, and slowly pick it up. This is not a cooking competition. Don't race to pick up the knife.
Right. Yeah, and you definitely don't want to bump a handle of a knife that's sticking out over the edge and cause it to, fall onto you and injure you.
Yeah, that's why I don't, if the way I'm picturing it is at the front of the cutting board, I don't find that to be very safe. So I would definitely do the back side of the cutting board or off to the side if you have enough
Off
space,
to the side.
depending on,
Yeah.
your kitchen setup.
Well, Chris, these have been such great tips, and now talking to you about food, I'm kind of hungry now. I have to go find a snack. So, do you have a favorite food, or a favorite food either that you like to eat or a favorite that you like to cook or bake?
Oh my goodness. That is like the $40 million question, right? Okay. I think my favorite food, if I could only eat, we're going to say one type of food, it would be barbecue.
Yeah, that might be easier.
I love barbecue. I really think I could eat barbecue every day. And that really is because you can smoke and cook anything. So last summer I was addicted to, what was it? I was smoking halibut, I think. Oh no, it was tilapia.
Oh,
I was smoking tilapia every week for smoked fish tacos. And it was outstanding. I mean, it just so good, unmatched. I do prefer grilled over fried anyway, but the smoked element to it was so, so good. And then just cookies in general are probably my favorite thing to bake because it's like a pizza. It's like a sandwich. You can make it whatever you want. And I love that about cookies. I love that you can make any combination. And I did this once where this is another instance of I wasn't paying close attention because I didn't measure, and I put a little bit too much of a spice in this cookie, and it was a little too much nutmeg, and it wasn't my favorite, but it was still good because it was a cookie. So I thought it was still pretty good. I have not made those ones since because it was a little too strong, but cookies and barbecue, I think, are probably my go-to if I just had no other options and that was it, because I still feel like
that would be
options
it.
are endless that way.
And one thing I forgot to ask you was about recipes. I think frequently, you have great cooks and they just kind of put ingredients in. But when you're baking, that's much more precise. And do you have any tips for people who are using recipes? Do you use like recipes off a tablet, or electronically where it can be read out to you, or enlarged hard copy recipes?
I use all of the things. And that's just because I've been cooking for so long that I have different recipes in different formats all over my kitchen. So I have a binder that has, large print stuff that I've created, but I also have cookbooks from prior to my vision loss. I actually had to dig one out a couple weeks ago, and I chose to take a photo of the recipe in multiple parts so that I could then blow it up on my phone and be able to see what the recipe was, because I hadn't made this recipe in probably 8 or 9 years. And I just lost so much vision since the last time I looked at it. Tablets are great in the kitchen. If possible, elevate them off of the counter or use a stand. Try to protect them. They can become obviously very dirty, but you don't want them, I don't know how waterproof tablets are versus phones these days. So it's quite an expensive product. So take care of it and take mind of that. But I use apps. I'll use YouTube. I'll use all different kinds of things. And generally, I will make notes on the recipe. So certain apps do allow for that, but otherwise, if it's a hard copy, I'll make a note or I'll copy and paste some things into a Google Word doc. I've done that very, very often. And then I will make notes for myself about how it came out and what I would like to do differently, because I may not make that recipe for another 3 to 6 months, depending on what it is. And I'm not going to remember. So taking notes is really critical. And that's how I run my Thanksgiving Olympics, is I take notes every year and I write down what worked and what didn't. If I buy a different kind of bird, I make sure I notate that, and, I set my expectations.
Well, and That's a great tip. Taking notes, that's a great tip for everyone, no matter what level of vision you have. That is a great tip for everyone to use. Chris, I have so enjoyed speaking with you today. And maybe someday I'll be lucky enough to be able to sample some cookies or something that you've baked, because it all sounds very good. Everything you've talked about. So thank you for joining us. I'm sure folks will find all these tips very helpful and also encouraging if people have been enjoying cooking and as their vision has declined, are struggling a bit with that. Just having these tips to be able to keep doing what they love.
Definitely.
So thank you.
And really just try it. Just try it. It might not come out perfect, but if it comes out good, take notes, make improvements, and try again. I know it's hard, and losing your vision it's very difficult. It's a form of grief, absolutely, and you have to work your way through it. But maybe working your way through it is by making some delicious cookies and eating your feelings. And if you do, take some notes and give it a go. And I think adapting and overcoming is certainly a characteristic and personality trait that not everybody has inherently. But if you just try it, I think there's really no harm in not trying it. Try something simple. Try a dish you already know how to make with tools you already have. Go slow and make adjustments along the way so that you can now make a newer version or a different version a little bit differently with your sight loss of something you already know how to do.
Well, thanks again. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Audio Information of Colorado's Topic of the Month. We hope you're inspired to do a little cooking, and if not, maybe at least a little eating. You can try something new. So we hope you'll join us next week for our next segment for this month. And also, I always encourage you to listen to our After Sight podcast. We have some really fun things coming up, interviews coming up for that, as well as Blind Sight that covers mental health topics. So tune into those as well. Leave your reviews or comments for us. We appreciate that. And have a good rest of your day.